Hello and welcome back to another Go Ballistic transfer special where it's a Tuesday, so it's time to focus on Rangers. After Roger Hannah's special appearance over on the Celtic one last week, we've got David Friel seconded.
Trading places.
This week, trading places, see if it becomes a regular thing or not. Let's see how you do. So, big week for Rangers obviously on the pitch, the competitive, the real stuff starting. The Champions League qualifiers, transfer window very much in the foreground still as well. Let's start with a player that's been talked about in every one of these for the past 4 or 5 weeks, however long we've been doing it. Conor Coady. It's looked like it was going to be done. It's a player Rangers have wanted. Doesn't quite look that way now, does it?
I'm really surprised, Jonathon. I've been away for 10 days away to see Peppa Pig down south, and I must admit, I expected this deal to be done by the time I come back. It's been a long-running saga. There's been a few of them in the transfer window with both old firm teams really this summer. But it looked for all intents and purposes as if it was very, very close. I think, to be fair, he's clearly on a good contract at Leicester City. Leicester City have got a new manager. They obviously want back up into the Premier League. I would imagine that the manager will be looking at Conor Coady and thinking he's a player you would want to kind of almost build that challenge around. However, clearly Rangers want him as well. I thought there would be a deal to be done. It's dragged on, and you wonder how long it drags on. Sorry, the longer it drags on, will it ever happen? I think if you look at you put all the kind of jigsaw pieces together, he's clearly the kind of cornerstone of defence that Russell Martin probably would want. Real experience, played for England, good leader, great communicator, good player as well. However, I think there's still a bit of work for it to be done.
You mentioned the experience and the leadership. That's something Rangers badly need more of, isn't it? I mean, from the players they've signed this summer, Joe Rothwell's maybe the only one you could probably put in that category. So I think that's obviously why so many fans certainly were keen to see Coady be a player coming in.
Yeah, because it maybe raised eyebrows a little bit, because I would imagine Rangers in the new era, the player trading model, will go for younger players, and I think you've seen that already. Rangers going for some younger players. However, you always need that balance, you always need that experience. And look, we're going to come on to guys like Robin Propper. Rangers, in terms of having that experienced head at the back, we don't know what's going to happen with John Souttar. I think Coady fits the bill. I think from listening to people who have maybe been close to him, speaking to him, it sounds like he was quite excited about the project, the prospect of coming up to Rangers as well. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I just would imagine ahead of such a big game at Panathinaikos, Rangers would have wanted that deal done and would have wanted him bedded in. It's not happened. I dare say Russell Martin will still be keen for it to happen, but it looks, as I said, that there's a bit of work to be done there.
You know, we've talked about the leadership and experience from a Rangers point of view. I suppose what we haven't really touched upon is those exact same things are probably what makes them maybe an attractive option to keep at Leicester, especially for their new manager. You know, they've gone through a lot of change. Guys like Vardy, that whole team's broken up a bit now.
Yeah.
They need guys like that around as well, don't they?
Of course they do. And if a new manager comes in, no matter what the owners are saying about wages and about having to trim a wage bill or around like that, if you're Marty Cifuentes, you would want a guy like Conor Coady. You're looking at a real hard league. You know, the Championship is gruelling. You want guys that have been over course and distance before. He has been. And that's what I'm saying in terms of being work to be done, because I think for Conor Coady to come to Rangers, there's going to have to be some financial agreement. He's on big wages. He's still under contract. So somewhere down the line, someone's got to give. Somebody's going to have to make a sacrifice, or someone's going to have to come to terms in terms of a potential fee. Is it a free transfer? What happens to the wages? Who takes care of all that? So as I said, it's clearly a deal Rangers have been working on, but who knows whether it will happen now.
And wages in a contract are certainly at play with regards to a man you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Robin Propper. Another one that's just looked, for all the world, it's going to be done. Now there's some noises coming out of 20. They might be thinking about maybe moving away from this, the time it's taken. Where are we with that?
It just looks to me, look, he's not got a future at Rangers. I'll be honest with you, Robin Propper has had a decent career over in Holland. He's not a Rangers centre-half. I've never, from the first moment I saw him play for Rangers, I just don't think he's a fit for the club. He's clearly got attributes. I don't think Scottish football suits him. And it was weird, some of the bigger games, even games against Celtic at times, I actually thought he was a bit more switched on. I just don't think he's got the pace, the presence to be a Rangers player. But he's on a good contract at Rangers. You know, he moved to Rangers for bigger wages than he was on FC20. I don't think FC20 are going to match those wages. So again, looking at the situation, I don't think it's taken a huge leap to say that again there has to be somewhere the both parties will have to meet in the middle. But FC20 can't wait forever. But it's a really difficult situation because Robin Propper clearly doesn't feature in Russell Martin's plans. So again, this might be one that kind of kicks on for another couple of weeks before someone down the line says, right, okay, let's just come to a deal and we move on. But he's not going to be a Rangers player next season. Yeah,
a bit of a nightmare scenario obviously at the moment, trying to get him out the door. What could a solution look like there? I mean, could there maybe be an option that somebody eventually takes him on loan just to get him off the books? And there's a bit of talk who pays what at that point just to get him out the door?
Yeah, I think it then becomes, again, it comes down to basically numbers in terms of wages, in terms of who's covering who. And listen, I never blame the players for digging their heels in, because at Robin Propper's age that he is just now, the deal he's on at Rangers, he's never going to get that anywhere else.
This was his big career contract.
This was his big career contract, his big career move. So X number of years left in that, he'll be saying, well, I'm due X amount of money in wages. Again, there has to be an agreement. But yeah, look, we've seen it a million times. Even with Rangers, you look back to letting Ben Davies go on loan, to let Kieran Dowell go on loan, Rabbi Matondo go on loan. That was that was a kind of middle ground where you're getting somebody to cover part of the wages. In an ideal world, you would get your money back for these guys in a fee, you would get their wages covered and everybody's happy, but it doesn't work like that. And look, we are looking at this from a Rangers perspective because Rangers season started so early. Other clubs maybe don't have the same level of game coming up so soon. They can maybe afford to take their time. I do think Robin Propper will end up probably at FC20, but again, somewhere down the line, one of the parties, and there's three parties at play here, will probably have to make a sacrifice.
Before we move on to other positions, just one more player to mention in terms of defence, and that's Owen Beck. Yeah. Linked to Rangers earlier in the summer, it was kind of the understanding from here it was never likely to happen. He's now on his way to Derby County. Celtic certainly did an interest in him before, Rangers did previously as well, not necessarily this time around. Would he have been someone that would have added to that Rangers squad? Would you have liked to have seen him there?
I think so, in a sense that, look, we've not seen a lot of him over the last year. Certainly at Dundee, for that spell he had, he was outstanding. Clearly suited Scottish football, very dynamic left back, reminded me so much of Andy Robertson, even the way he plays. Celtic were very keen on him. Rangers obviously had I think probably would have taken him at a certain level, but the kind of money being knocked about in terms of his potential fee and all that, I don't think it was going to represent value, and it's going to be a really interesting position there for Rangers because it looks like Red Van Yilmaz doesn't have a future. You've still got Yefte there, you will touch on Max Arns, who's been shifted over there as well, but it's clearly a position that I would imagine Russell Martin in an ideal world will get somebody in. I think Owen Beck would have been a good addition had Rangers really followed through any kind of initial interest, but probably not at the kind of millions that were being talked about in terms of a fee. Look, a good player, but I'm not sure that's a priority as such for Rangers because they do have a bit of cover there.
Yeah, big money, as you mentioned. I think £7-10 million. He's going to Derby County on loan for the season.
With the best will in the world, I don't think you'd be paying that for Owen Beck.
No. And you mentioned Max Aarons there. Obviously, a player that's played as a right back his entire career, made his name as a right back, linked to some huge clubs as a right back. For all the will in the world, looks like he's going to start his Rangers career, as you said, as a left back. Is it a bit of a waste playing him there?
I'm not so sure it's a waste. Look, I think Russell Martin will be, and I don't think he'll play there going forward. I do think Rangers will look for and whether that may be Yefte, maybe he will win the manager over if it is going to be Max Aarons that starts over there. It's one of those ones where I think he's been signed as a right back, but to start this season with such big games, I think you would look at it and you think, we spoke about the experience figure in defence. James Tavernier, for all his critics, is still a vastly experienced figure. So it doesn't really surprise me that Russell Martin's probably looked at it and thinking, look, I'm better keeping him at right back, shifting Aarons over, and then seeing what happens in the middle in terms of Jigga, Suter, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, look, it is a position that Rangers will be looking at, as I said. I think predominantly Max Aarons will play as a right back. In terms of a waste, I just think he's clearly a good player, he's clearly a guy with experience. So I think at this stage in the season, and Russell Martin keeps saying the team will look so different, I think it kind of makes a bit of sense that he thinks, look, I want my good players in the team, if it means him shifting over. And look, it's kind of a weird one, I always think right-footed players can play left back, no problem. I think the other way about is always an issue. You'd very, very rarely see a left-footed player playing right back. I think he's experienced enough, and Russell Martin knows him inside out as well to know that he can play there.
Let's move on to the top end of the park where it feels that there's still quite a lot to be resolved. We'll start with Dor Turgeman, the Israeli striker. Again, earlier in the window, that looked like one that perhaps had a decent chance of happening. We've spoken in here with Roger about how the conflict over there just now had muddied the waters, and now the Maccabi Tel Aviv manager has said, in quote, that it would be a fairy tale offer that would see Turgeman leave. This one's looking pretty unlikely now as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you also need to factor in, look, he's a player Rangers have liked, they've looked at a lot of strikers, but I think you also need to factor in, and as we spoke earlier about players that haven't left the building, I think there's a bit of domino effect here. Rangers have two strikers in Hamza Igamane and Friel Dessers who have been the subject of major interest, who Russell Martin, I think in his pre-match press conference for Panathinaikos, for as long as they're here, he wasn't exactly kind of shutting the door on a sale. Yeah. And I wonder whether Rangers are trying to get their ducks in a row and trying to have a contingency for one or both going, and that's where guys like Dor Turgeman come into it. I think Rangers would only really spend big on a striker if one of those two or both go. I think they've got a little bit of cover there, but unless Rangers get funds in, I can't see them splashing out absolute fortunes on a guy like Dor Turgeman. And if the manager's talking about fairy tale offer, I don't think at this situation, at this point in time, the Rangers will be going and chasing that, but especially given who they've still got in the books. You mentioned Hamza Igamane there, obviously back page of the paper on Sunday. Rennes, the latest club to have a serious interest. Feyenoord are now kind of in the round as well. Lille, obviously that's not going away. Loads of English clubs have been crediting interest as well. Saw him at training yesterday. Pictures, he looks pretty happy. Big smile on his face, absolutely. Couldn't be happier.
Absolutely. Do you still expect him to move on this summer?
Yes, I just think there's too much noise about it, and whether I don't mean he's agitating for a move, whether his camp feel now is the time for him to move on. If I was Rangers, I would take the money, because it seems as if there's going to be decent money on offer for him. And now, where he ends up, who knows? As you said, Lille looked really, really likely at one stage. You've now got other clubs potentially coming to the table. I think he's a really, really talented player. However, he's raw. He's a guy who I think he'll go in real bursts and flourishes. Could you go and hang your hat on him to be Rangers number 9 for an entire season and post the return of 25, 30 goals? I'm not sure. And I think he's got so much potential, so much raw attributes that you can understand why French clubs, Dutch clubs, whoever it is, are thinking he's a gem, and I think he is a gem. However, if I was Rangers, I would take the money, but I can also understand why they're probably waiting for the sweet spot in terms of an offer. Because I wouldn't just sell him for buttons. I would go. I mean, we had a debate in the office about how much he's potentially worth.
I have a debate in here with Roger every week.
Yeah, I would take anything approaching £10 million from him. I genuinely would. I think it would represent a huge profit. I know AS Farah drew a cut of it as well, but I think this stuff about 15 million, I just don't think he's worth that just now. If he could get it, amazing. But I would take anything approaching around about 10 million for Igamane. Look, I think he's a good player, but I think Rangers need to get in this player trading model. And as I said, there's just too much noise. I just think come the end of the window, he'll be gone.
Want to watch closely. Probably more clubs to even enter the fray than we know about already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, look, I get the sense that the people around him are maybe quite busy, but they're only doing their job. And listen, you only have to look at his highlights reel. We talk about YouTube reels and stuff like that about players when they're ever linked. We're straight on looking at the guys you've never heard of. He's got an impressive one, but I do think he's a good player. I think he's also, he's a powerful player. He's got a kind of knack of scoring goals in big games too, which is always good. So, look, I think Rangers, if it was Niels Coppen or Philippe Clement that found him, deserve huge praise, because they brought him in. He was so raw. He developed as the season goes on. He's far from the finished article, but I think he's a player that Rangers could get that money for.
Well, he is going to be involved tonight, not from the start. Same goes for Friel Dessers, and that likely means it's going to be Danilo, almost a bit of a forgotten man, leading the line, which seems quite incredible when you think about everything that's going on. But he looks like he's going to be the man starting this huge Champions League game for Rangers tonight. He has found a wee bit of form, albeit in closed doors friendlies. This is, of course, a transfer show, so can he almost be like a new signing for Rangers this year? Yeah,
that's always a cliche, right? At the start of any new manager's reign, or when a player comes back from injury, he is a player who was, when Michael Beale signed him, Rangers had high hopes from him. He's got a background at Ajax, background at Feyenoord. he's a goal scorer, and it was kind of really interesting because there's been a lot of chat about him. He was, as you say, the kind of forgotten man. Now, he's had horrendous injuries, from the kind of cheekbone one to the knee injury. I feel as if Danilo's just never really had a run of games, right? And he's now, everybody, Rangers fans to neutral observers, pundits, we all just refer to him as injury prone, right? He's just injury prone because he always gets injured. However, I think if you look at his stats, if you take away all that and if you look at his stats, he's played 48 games for Rangers. We look before we come in. Don't just know these off the top of my head. But I think he's made less than 20 starts for Rangers. He's got 12 goals and I think 9 assists in those. That's a good return. To me, he's a guy, again, has shown in his career that he's capable, at Rangers I'm talking about, of going in bursts and flourishing. Now, we obviously probably all just kind of wrote him off because he kind of was in that sort of injured period during the kind of Philippe Clement into Barry Ferguson reign. He just never really got a run. I think now is a defining moment for his Rangers career. You're not talking about a guy that cost 750 grand. He was like a £5 million striker with a good pedigree behind him. He's experienced, he can score goals, he can miss chances. Everybody talks about serial dessers. Danilo has his fair share of misses as well. However, I don't think going into a Champions League qualifier with him as your in-form starting striker, as looks at it, and obviously it's based in very little during pre-season, is necessarily a disaster. I think Danilo has something to offer Rangers. I think if he can stay fit, he's clearly a player of a certain pedigree. I think he's a player that's more than good enough for Scottish football. He's shown that as well. And he seems quite a popular guy. He seems a good type. Russell Martin talking about how his language skills, I think he speaks 5 languages, has been a real help for bedding in any other players. So, look, it's a defining guy. It's a defining period for him. He seems a likeable guy. And you hope for his sake he does get a bit of luck in terms of injuries because it's just been so stop-start for him for Rangers. But I think he's shown enough to maybe show that he can be a success at Rangers. However, he has to keep this going, this kind of pre-season run he's had. He has to take it into games like the Panathinaikos won both legs into the end of the European qualifiers blowing it, because with the situation around Igamane and Dessers, it looks as if he is going to get a chance.
He is indeed, and someone who won't quite be starting with him yet, it looks like, is JD Gassama, the 7th and most recent new recruit at Ibrox. I just wonder what you think about that, the fact he's not getting chucked into this tonight, because it's a big problem position for Rangers. Me and Roger, we talked about this every week, how desperate they are to get a winger. They get one in, one that they've chased for a while, and then don't immediately start. Rangers have there a lot of criticism for that in recent years, signing players, maybe taking a bit of time to get them in, whereas on the other side of the city at Celtic, they sign someone, chuck them straight in. Does the fitness give them a genuine excuse for not starting them this time around?
I think how many debates did we have around Philippe Clement and the sports scientists and all that, and people, red flags and all that sort of stuff. But I do think at the start of the season, it is, are you better off having a half-fit Gassama compared to a fully fit Finlay Curtis or Kieran Dowell or Oscar Cortez or something like that? I think at the start of the season, you've already seen it with Thilo Asgard picking up an injury. I think you really need to be careful. Look, we've spoken at length about how big a game this is for Rangers in terms of what comes beyond it, in terms of potential Champions League qualification, all the riches it brings that, in terms of even getting to a stage where Europa League chances have increased. It's a huge game. But I think if he's not fully fit and he's not really done a full pre-season, I think you'd be taking a massive gamble to start him. And obviously, I've not really seen that much of him, but everything I've read about him, everything I've heard about him, I think he's going to be an impact player at times anyway. So if you can bed him in, give him more minutes over the course of the games that he would maybe be due or maybe ready to start in Greece, then I can understand it. And look, I get it. A lot of football fans will say he's signed, he's cost X amount of £1 million, get him in the team. But I think at this stage of the season, when you've maybe only had 10 training sessions, I think you need to be really, really careful.
One player who did get a full pre-season but has been completely bombed out of the equation at Ibrox is Ross McCausland. Similar to what we were talking to Robin Proper earlier, this is just a player that clearly has no future, doesn't he?
Yeah, look, he's not going to... He was a young player who came in, had a real impact when he first came in. I think as you tend to see a lot of the time with young players, it maybe tails off a bit. They maybe, really struggle to kind of make that same kind of impact because everything's new and they come in with so much energy and bravery in the ball and all that sort of stuff. Look, I think he's a good player. I think he's a guy who will have a good career. He's probably at the stage where he has to go and play. Now he has to go out. Various clubs, I mean, he was linked with MLS. I think he's been linked with a move to Cyprus as well.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's a lot of clubs in kind of maybe League One in England, look at the Scottish Premiership. I think Rangers need to decide what they want to do with Ross McCausland. As I said, I think there's a player there. Is he going to be a prominent feature of the Russell Martin connected? That I would very much doubt it. However, I do think there's a career there for him, but probably for his sake, he has to go, whether it's on loan or whether it's permanent this summer.
I'll just briefly touch on Metinho as well, because that was way back at the start of transfer window. Robert Thompson was all over that story, Rangers' interest in him. They officially missed out on him because he's going back to Basel permanently. Looks like Rangers have missed out on a decent wee player.
Yeah, I think he is a good player, but I would also look at it and say that he's clearly a player Rangers had looked at. I think when Robert kind of wrote the story, he was a player Leeds really liked as well, and I think he'd probably been alerted through the kind of obviously the partnership and the same owners. But I think it was probably one that you were looking at and you were always wondering, does it maybe mean that there's a Raskin going or a Diamande going? And this was obviously before Joe Rothwell come on the scene as well. So I just look at that position now. Rangers have got even more in there. Your Conor Barron and guys like that, Nadeem Barami. Is it a priority for Rangers right now? Probably not. So look, the player wasn't going to wait forever, and he's going elsewhere. But yeah, I think he would have been a good addition. But I don't think Rangers are struggling in midfield for now. I think that looks like a kind of really strong area for them.
The Brazilian Paul Pogba, nonetheless. He's
you always love these monikers.
Sad we'll never be able to see him in action, but there you go. And just kind of closing thoughts this week, David. You know, all the names we've mentioned there, it's interesting that every name mentioned today has kind of been a name that's been mentioned before. With this influx for a few weeks where there was all kinds of new names being linked to Rangers, not really since Gassama, who's been signed, has there been another name that's kind of entered the fray. Should fans be concerned in any way by that as it stands just now? What do you think's going on there?
No, I don't think they should be concerned. Look, there's a natural cut-off point in terms of Rangers' first major involvement was going to be this Champions League qualifier. Look, a fair bit of work was done. I think you need to give the owners, the recruitment team and everything. I mean, Rangers have signed a lot of players already. I think they've strengthened areas, undoubtedly. Look, it's not been perfect in terms of recruitment yet, but I think Russell Martin was always, it's hard to get all your work done by, July the 22nd. And I think just now, I just wonder, I'm sure there's so much work going on in the background, I'm sure Rangers are talking to targets, I'm sure they're lining people up. I just wonder about the domino effect now. You might be looking at who are the outgoings, where are the areas you really need to strengthen, what is the money coming in. Also, Rangers have to factor in, and every club will, what European competition they're going to be playing in. If Rangers can get through this round, it maybe changes the landscape. If they don't get through this round, as I said earlier on, it's going to lead to a really tough Europa League draw. So I think all that stuff will be coming into play. I wouldn't be concerned. I would imagine there's so much work going on in the background, but it's human nature that the work that goes on next will depend on who leaves, what offers come in. And just in terms of the environment the Rangers are going to be playing in, the riches that are potentially on offer. But look, I wouldn't be concerned at all. Russell Martin again, and he's been pretty clear in this, the squad will be unrecognisable. And I would imagine Rangers will make another, 7 or 8 so far? I think Rangers will make at least another 3 or 4 signings. But I would also expect 5 or 6 to get out the door too. But I think we'll be doing these transfer window specials a long time to come, Jonathon.
Plenty more to come indeed. Just finally, any Peppa Pig exclusives? Free fans to be transfer up here?
No, there was not. No, it was a very enjoyable trip.
She play left back?
She could probably play left back. Yeah. No, enjoyable trip. But look, Conor Coady's not here yet.
There we go. Well, thanks for coming on this week, David.
No problem,
don't forget the Celtic transfer special is back on Friday. Go Ballistic has also made its big return with Chris Boyd. That'll be back next Monday as well. And don't forget, you can now get in touch with any questions for Boydie, Roger and the gang. You can email goballistic@thesun.co.uk and we'll pick that up there. See you next time.